Hi everyone, and thanks for being with me. Today there was a little bit of a scandal, to say the least, in relation to Donald Trump and Australia's ambassador to the United States, namely Kevin Rudd. Now this came about because Nigel Farage did an interview with Donald Trump in which he asked him a question about Rudd and some of the things that Rudd had said about Donald Trump. Now, it's worth noting at the beginning of this question, I'll play it to you, that it was obvious that Sky News had asked him, because Farage mentions this, that Sky News had asked him to ask this question. So here was the right-wing media endeavouring to get their noses placed into the media context by asking a question of Trump over which Trump had really no answer to, because he doesn't even know who Kevin Rudd is. However, he asked the question anyway. So Trump carries on with his normal crap, which was about, if this man is nasty, and the only reason why he is nasty because Farage told Trump that he was, and Trump decides to ramble just briefly, and then the matter is over. But the issue was raised in Parliament today. So I've got a number of clips for you, and that is firstly the Farage question of Trump, and then I've got the opposition asking a question in relation to this in question time. And then at the end of question time, Albanese found it necessary, after question time had concluded, to make a statement in relation to all this. It's quite interesting when you put all of this together and understand exactly what was happening here, because it is an interesting issue in that, if a president decides that they don't want a particular ambassador, then do they have the power and authority to kick them out? Well, actually, they don't. The ambassadors are appointed by the government for the country in which the ambassador comes from. And it would be unlikely, I think, that if Trump, heaven forbid, ever becomes president again, that Rudd would be forced to leave if an Albanese government was still in power. So let's just have a look at some of these clips, and then I'll find some space to talk about it as we go through them. So the first one is the Farage.
Got China to think about, and our friends at Sky News Australia wanted me to ask you this. The AUKUS deal that's in place on nuclear submarines, America, the UK, Australia, very, very important deal. It's there to try and combat that huge growth, naval growth in China. But now, of course, things have changed in Australia. We've got a Labour government in Australia. The previous ambassador, Joe Hockey, I think was quite a good friend of yours. You got on pretty well with him. Now they've appointed Kevin Rudd, former Labour MP. I mean, he has said the most horrible things. You were a destructive president, a traitor to the West, and he's now Australia's ambassador in Washington.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Would you take a phone call from him?
He won't be there long if that's the case. I don't know much about him. I heard he was a little bit nasty. I hear he's not the brightest bulb, but I don't know much about him. But if he's at all hostile, he will not be there long.
That was it. That was the sum total of the exchange. Trump doesn't know who Rudd is, doesn't care about who Rudd is. It was Farage who told him he'd said these things about Trump, all of which are pretty true. And then from that point on, Trump went with it, because Trump cannot have a thought of his own that is about any sort of nuance, any sort of understanding about anybody else apart from himself. So he wouldn't have known who Trump was. He wouldn't have known who Rudd was, and he doesn't know who Trump is either, for that matter. But the focus becomes on this person said something that was negative about me, and the only way he knows that is because Farage mentioned it to him. So they decided in their wisdom in the Liberal Party to raise this as an issue in question time today. And it's an interesting exchange just to see how Albanese handles this question, because it's a really important one. Why is it this 19-second clip, which is all it is, becomes, sorry, I lie, a 59-second clip? Why this 59-second clip becomes also important in relation to our relationship with the United States? And the thing that I found probably most disturbing is that it appears that the Liberal Party are in a way cheering for a Trump presidency, which would be a disaster for us and everybody else. But you could almost see underneath it all, they were wishing that Trump gets in so that they could just, kick out Rudd. And so I find this kind of horrific in a way. And it's interesting just to watch the way by which Albanese handled.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Considering our Ambassador of the United States, Kevin Rudd's descriptions of Donald Trump as a, quotes, destructive president and, quotes, a traitor to the West, and given Mr Trump's response today that Mr Rudd is, quotes, not the brightest bulb, quotes, nasty and, quotes, won't be there long, will the Prime Minister be reassessing Mr Rudd's position as Ambassador to our most important, or as Minister Farrell suggests, our second most important, strategic ally?
Order. Give a call to the Prime Minister. Order.
Why don't you ask about a business standard, Fletch?
Prime Minister has the call.
I've asked about cars, Fletch.
Prime Minister has the call. Order.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I'm somewhat surprised to get that question from the Manager of Opposition Business that says everything about the character of this current opposition.
Yeah, it does.
Order.
Yeah, it does.
It sure does.
Order. Members on my left, the member for Fairfax. Manager was heard in silence.
At a time when Australians are worried about the cost of living and a range of issues that affect their daily lives, they decide to politicise Australia's representative in Washington DC. Something that was never done by this side of the chamber when Arthur Sinodinos occupied that position, when Joe Hockey occupied that position, and when other representatives, including Alexander Downer, George Brandis and others as High Commissioner of the United Kingdom. Because one of the things that I have never seen happen before in 28 years in this chamber is an attempt to politicise Australia's representative overseas in an important nation such as that. Never seen it before.
Order.
Never seen it before. This is what the Leader of the Opposition said.
The member for Fairfax is warned.
This is what the Leader of the Opposition said on the appointment of Mr Kevin Rudd, a former Australian Prime Minister as Ambassador to the United States. He said this: "We welcome the appointment of Kevin Rudd to the United States." When Joe Hockey, a predecessor, was appointed, he said this: "I'm sure the Americans will give him a warm welcome." Those opposite know that whether it is Kevin Rudd in the United States or Stephen Smith, who is currently here as a result of the OCME meetings as High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, who I hosted last evening, and I'll host the OCME delegates, both the Defence and Foreign Ministers, including former Prime Minister David Cameron, at the Lodge tomorrow, and be very proud to do so, is that when we engage, particularly with our AUKUS allies, the idea that we have a cheap shot question like that diminishes the opposition and says everything about why this bloke is not fit to be the Prime Minister of Australia.
Chinese, at least, is very intelligent. He's studied more than what Trump was. And if you compare the two, there's no doubt that Rudd is far more intelligent and brighter than Trump. I'm not necessarily a Rudd fan, need to say that, but nevertheless, this was an opportunity. The Liberal Party used this as an opportunity to have a go at the government, and it was inappropriate. In fact, what Albanese chose to do then was, at the end of question time, he chose to make a statement, after which Dutton also makes a statement of his own saying that he was misrepresented. And I'll play that for you right now.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I asked for the questions to be placed on the notice paper, and, Mr Speaker, I asked to add to an answer.
Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. In response to a question from the Manager of Opposition today that went to a quote from Mr Donald Trump, former President of the United States, in an interview with Nigel Farage, I wish to add this comment with regard to the position of Kevin Rudd as the Ambassador of Australia to the United States. On the 11th of February, just a month ago, Peter Dutton was the Leader of the Opposition was asked by Andrew Clennell on Sky News the following: could you work with Kevin Rudd as Ambassador, or would you seek to replace him if you're elected? Leader of the Opposition responded as follows: I mean, what grounds would there be to replace him? I would work very closely with him. I know him, Kevin. I caught up with him when he was last in Australia, and he came to give us an update in relation to what he was seeing in Washington. He's represented his country well, and we are a few steps down the road there.
Order, members on my left. Members on my left will cease interjecting.
But I think for most Australians, they get it. The importance of the relationship with America is at its height, more so than any period since the Second World War. That's a fairly significant statement, but that's exactly as the Prime Minister puts it as well. It is indeed, Mr Speaker, the way that this Prime Minister puts it, because the relationship with the United States is very important. It should be beyond the sort of cheap politics that we saw earlier today.
Order. We'll move to... the Leader of the Opposition is seeking the call.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I seek leave to make a personal explanation.
Do you claim to be Mr President?
Yes, I do, Mr Speaker.
You may proceed.
By the Prime Minister just then in question time. I did have complimentary things to say about Mr Rudd, and it is in our national interest to make sure that the Ambassador to the United States, our most important strategic alliance partner, is successful, and we will do everything we can to support him. The point I make, Mr Speaker, is that the President of the United States, past President Trump...
The manager will pause. The Deputy Manager will pause. The Leader of the Opposition needs to claim where he is being misrepresented,
I'm just
not adding to an answer. So just explain where the misrepresentation occurred.
I'm in the process of doing that for you, Mr Speaker. And President Trump, who likely will be the nominee for the Republican Party at the next election in November, has now made very serious comments in relation to Australia's ambassador. They need to be answered, and Mr Rudd needs to repair the relationship. That's the point we were making, and we won't be hectored to or intimidated by these bully boys over here.
There we have it. There we have Dutton's response to it, and it was all about attacking the Labor Party. At the end of the day, this wasn't about really any policy decisions, or it wasn't even about Rudd. It was about an opportunity that the Liberal Party chose to use to attack the Labor Party, and I guess, in a sense, to attack one of their formidable opponents, namely Kevin Rudd. So I'd be interested to know what you think about this exchange, whether you think it's just an occurrence which is going to be dismissed, is not going to be all that relevant, or whether there's something in it that says a lot more about the Liberal Party's attitude towards the Labor Party, and particularly towards anyone that's appointed in a position such as ambassador to the US. Let me know. Subscribe to my channel, ring the bells, do whatever you need to do. But I'd be interested to know what your comments are in relation to this issue around Kevin Rudd. Now, Kevin Rudd is entitled as a private citizen to say whatever he cares to say about another politician. And he's certainly at liberty to say whatever he needed to say about Donald Trump. You know, we've heard lots about what Malcolm Turnbull thought of his colleagues, you know, through the episode on the ABC. And we now, you know, and that's okay when you're in private, but it's not the sort of thing you would do as an ambassador. Now, obviously, Kevin Rudd, when he said those things, actually meant them about Trump, and they're accurate, but it doesn't mean necessarily that he has to emphasise those points now that he's ambassador to the United States, but he certainly can emphasise those points because Trump is not the president and hopefully will not be. but we'll have to wait and see. Let me know what you think in the comments below. In the meantime, take care, look after yourselves, and be safe.